Hi everyone, this is Team 2, and for our 6th presentation, we will talk about the construction process of the cadet chapel after the foundation, which we talked about last week, was completed. Well, last time we installed retaining walls to level the sloped land and open caissons to support the weight of the building. Now let's build the cadet chapel on this well-prepared land. Before we get into that, let's talk about preparing the ground a little bit more. Since the land is currently a soil base, we need to create a solid ground. We discussed caisson foundations last week, ensuring the floor can support heavy buildings. However, to efficiently transfer the chapel's load and define its boundaries, we dug the ground into a specific shape and constructed slanted pillars. Now you guys might wonder why the pillars are slanted. We'll delve into this next time as it's linked to the roof, which would be explained in the upcoming presentation. For now, please understand that the floor was shaped, a concrete base has been laid, and slanted pillars were planted in order to define the chapel's boundaries. Now with the concrete base completed, we're ready for the genuine construction phase. Well, let's begin by briefing on the overall structural analysis of the chapel. We discovered something interesting when studying its blueprints, that there's a gap between the roof and the building inside. It turned out that the chapel is actually two separate structures that overlap. This meant that not only would the construction methods of both structures be different, but also how the load would be transferred. So we referred to the part of the building where actual activities take place as the building, and the structure that represents the cadet chapel, the roof. The roof simply covers the building while the load of the roof is transferred down through the frame and through this hinge part to the ground. The building section, like any other buildings, transfers its load to the ground along the column and beam frame. For our past and future presentations, because our team follows the timeline of the construction of the cadet chapel, today we'll focus on the structure beneath the roof, the interior building. Our building consists of two floors, measuring 85 by 26 meters and 12 meters tall. The first floor begins from 3 meters below ground level, while the second floor begins 3 meters above ground level. But isn't there something strange about the second floor? Well, it does not have walls or a roof. This is because the roof part that we're going to talk about next week would act as its walls and roof. So although it currently looks like an open space, it will transform into a closed space once the roof is complete. And now that we've given a rough overview, let's start the real building construction. Well, what's the first step of constructing any typical building? That's right, we need to build the skeletal frame, which is made up of columns, beams, and girders. Then how should the columns and beams be arranged? Well, that depends on the size and the purpose of the building. Once again, the cadet chapel is like two separate structures, so the columns that we're talking about right now only need to support this interior building. This building might not be tall, but it's really long, right? So when we consider the size, it seems appropriate to create a column grid like this. However, we must also consider the purpose of the building. The cadet chapel is used for religious purposes, and buildings with religious purposes, like churches and cathedrals, prefer to have large open interior spaces without pillars in between. Therefore, according to the needs of the people using the building, we decided not to build a column in between. Then you guys may ask, are you sure it's going to be stable? Well, hold on to your horses because we ain't done explaining yet. To replace the missing columns in the middle, we need to use more columns and more beams, allowing the load to be distributed among more members. And based on this principle, we decided to place a total of 11 columns on each side. Each column is 60 by 60 centimeters in size and spaced 7.2 meters apart. After these columns were constructed, wavy girders were placed on top of them, followed by beams. We installed a total of 22 beams, each measuring 60 by 120 centimeters, on top of the girders. It's really dense, isn't it? And by covering the ceiling on top of it, a ground floor space was created. In the completed building, it would look like this. On top of the ceiling, another concrete slab bigger than the ceiling was placed, and this would act as the second floor. As I mentioned earlier, the second floor does not require a frame because it has no walls and it doesn't have a roof. Okay, let's study further into each floor. Going into further detail of each floor, explained in previous presentations, the Cadet Chapel is a worship space for multiple faiths under the same roof. It is mainly separated into three different groups of religious worship: the Catholics, the Jews, and the Protestants. Among these, the worship chapels for Catholics and Jews were located on the first floor. The first floor is divided into several sections. From the main entrance, there's an entrance and a bathroom area extending about 15 meters, followed by a 41-meter long Catholic worship space, a 22-meter long Jewish worship space, and a 7-meter long area at the rear entrance. In front of the entrance, we installed interior walls for the hallway, bathrooms, and other spaces. We then covered these with a slab to create a mezzanine, enabling viewing areas for the services. Interior walls were further installed to separate the Catholic and Jewish worship spaces, and to create areas for preparation and for worship. Furthermore, behind the 22-meter section designated for the Jewish worship space, additional interior walls were installed for the area leading to the rear entrance of the building, almost completing the frame of the first floor. Now, to complete this space, exterior walls need to be installed, but we aren't going to go deep into the exterior walls on the first floor and on the walls of both the Jewish and Catholic chapels, as they are going to be completed during the presentation on the interior design after the installation of the roof part. On the upper floor lies the Protestant chapel, the largest chapel with 900 seats. The second floor is divided into three parts: an entrance and bathroom area about 10 meters from the main entrance, a 68-meter long Protestant worship space, and a 7-meter long area for the chancel at the rear entrance. Similar to the first floor, a mezzanine has been constructed near the entrance. The purpose of this space is to accommodate the humongous organ that plays beautiful music during services. If you look over at the end of the sides, there literally are no walls but a slight gap. Therefore, there are railings at the sides in order to prevent people from getting close. Now we've shaped the land, built a sturdy skeletal frame, and installed the interior walls, completing the construction of the building part. The building part is simpler than you might think, isn't it? Next week, we'll continue the construction process of the Cadet Chapel on the magnificent roof made up of the iconic 17 aluminum spires that makes the Cadet Chapel special.